Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum. We want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. The focus of today's conversation will be the challenges confronting Muslims in the West. Our guests for the conversation will be retired attorney Muhammad Bashir and our brother Amir Abdel Malik Ali from the West Coast. Both brothers are well-known and respected figures on this platform. Alhamdulillah. Now, with that being said, let's get into the topic for today, inshallah, with first of all, let me welcome our brothers to the platform, Brother Muhammad Bashir and Abdel Malik Ali.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good to have you both with us again, brother.
Good to be here. Good to be here. My salams to Brother Bashir as well.
Good to hear from you again. Always a pleasure.
You know, I extended an invitation to a number of brothers, for today's conversation because it is so, and it was a diverse invitation that went out. But you were the only two brothers that actually confirmed your participation, and so it was meant for us, the three of us, to have this conversation together today. It's a heavy conversation, a very heavy topic for us to have to deal with, but it's one that I think is incumbent upon Muslims, throughout the West, not just the United States, but throughout the West, to deal with, to wrestle with, because these are some very challenging times, and as I think we are all aware, things are not going to be changing for the better anytime soon. At least it doesn't appear that way. With that being said, there's a piece of video that I'd like for us to begin today's program with. It's a very thought-provoking piece of video from by a commentator by the name of C.J. Wellerman. We're just going to show about a third of that video, and then we're going to include a link to it so that our viewers and listeners will be able to access it in its entirety. This is a very thought-provoking and disturbing piece of video, but it goes to the heart of this conversation of ours for today. Brother Sadiq, let's see that video.
I'm hoping the words I use today will accurately convey where my heart is situated when I explain why I hold grave concerns for the future well-being of my Muslim friends living in Western countries. So let me preface this episode with the following statement. I am not motivated by party politics. I hate all political parties equally, because Democrats and Republicans in the United States, along with Tories and Labour in the United Kingdom, care only for one constituent. Rich and powerful corporations, including defence contractors, environmental polluters, and the like. And while I might describe myself as a progressive because of my strong views on human rights, I shun political leaders like Joe Biden because he describes himself a Zionist. And I shun the Democratic Party because they betray their voters by not ending financial and military aid to Israel. So with that all out of the way, here's the crux of my warning. Muslims living in the West are sleepwalking into an unprecedented catastrophe. And by catastrophe, I mean something akin to what Muslim minorities are currently suffering in India. because Muslims in the West are being led into a trap set by fascist white Christian nationalists in the UK and the United States, including Donald J. Trump.
And I'm a Muslim, and for you, I love you. Who's the next president?
He's a Muslim and he's for Trump. See?
I'm a Muslim for him.
Oh, wow.
All the way to the White House. All the way. I'm a Muslim. I support this man to the death with my life.
The man you just saw has walked into the exact same trap that Hindu nationalists set for Muslim voters in India before the 2014 elections, which brought Narendra Modi, the butcher of Gujarat, to power. You see, as hard it is to believe today, you saw a significant number of Muslim voters supporting Modi 9 years ago because they believed he'd be good for the economy and traditional family values.
Things I would like to say about PM Modi. So I personally, I was a kid, when the Gujarat riot happened, and I got carried away, and I hated him for a long time, that this man, because of him, so many Muslims died and whatever. Then I started observing, I started communicating with people, and then I realized my eyes opened up that there's so much of propaganda by the media, and they are demonizing him.
Well, nearly a full decade later, the preparation for a Muslim genocide is well underway, with Muslims being stripped of their basic human rights, subjected to daily mob lynching attacks and police brutality, and even murdered on live TV, because the Modi regime has sanctified street-level violence and lawlessness against religious minorities. And lest we not forget that Kashmir has been stripped of its semi-autonomous status, which has paved the way for the territory's Muslim-majority population to be ethnically cleansed at the hands of the Indian government's Hindu settler colonial enterprise. This is what Muslim voters got in exchange for voting Modi and BJP. Well, today a growing number of Muslims in North America and Europe are saying the same stuff about Trump that Muslims in India said about Modi 9 years ago. Saying stuff like, yeah, Trump says bad things about Muslims, but he stands up to the woke left and never started any wars. Well, first of all, Trump carried out more drone strikes and killed more innocent Muslim civilians in 4 years than Obama did in 8. And he sanctified Israeli war crimes by formally recognizing occupied Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. And look, I've witnessed Trump's unrepentant brutality against Muslims firsthand. When Somali refugees in Mogadishu explained to me 3 years ago how his drone strikes murdered their families.
waxaan dareennay inaa guryaheena baabi'een, xoolaheena baabi'een, beeraheena baabi'een, godkeena baabi'een, ilmaheena dhibaato loo geysto, annaga dhan aan dhibaatownay, dhibaato meesha naga soo cararsay. maanta hadda bacna ma haysano, guryana ma haysano, meelaan aadnana ma haysano, meelaan tagna ma haysano, meelaan
SubhanAllah. That is it's a very disturbing and challenging piece of video. Welcome back, brothers. Let's begin today's conversation on the challenges confronting Muslims in the West with both of you brothers just weighing in with your thoughts on what we just saw. And I don't know if I sent you the link to the video in the lead up to today's broadcast. I don't know if you saw it in its entirety, but it's a very disturbing and eye-opening for many commentary that I found to be right on point. I mean, he was this non-Muslim, very aware individual was pointing to a crisis confronting Muslims in America. I thought it was, for me personally, I thought it was really a stark comparison that he made in comparing the state of mind that many Muslims find themselves in politically in the United States with the state of mind that many of our Muslim brethren in India were in during the political rise of Modi, despite what happened in Gujarat on his watch when he was, I believe the title was Chief Minister of that region. With that being said, your thoughts on what we just saw? Who wants to go first?
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm not going to deal with the whole hadith because it's a really long hadith. I'll go right to the end. This old man told a companion, he said, let me give you some information. He said, if you recite Ayatul Kursi before you go to bed at night, the shaitan will not be able to harm you. When the companion went to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and told him what the old man said, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, he is a liar, but he has spoken the truth. He said it was the shaitan. So one of the lessons to learn in this story is that no matter who speaks the truth, no matter who's speaking the truth, we have to be able to recognize the truth. So even if the shaitan is speaking the truth, we're supposed to recognize that it's the truth. However, we're not supposed to think that shaitan is our ally. So one of the things that's happening today, as I see it, is that part of the confusion is that the right wing are taking some positions that are correct positions to take. The positions that they take on the whole LBGT thing, some of the positions that they took on during the pandemic on dealing with the jab and so on and so forth. They're taking some positions that are correct. But just because they're taking some positions that are correct, they are liars. They are not our allies. And so some of our brothers, when they see some of these right wingers taking a correct position on a particular issue, they have a tendency to think that that means that we're allies. No, we're not allies. These people are liars. These people are corrupt. These people are followers of shaitan. They are just uttering a particular truth on in certain matters. But we are not allies. But see, the same thing goes for the left. Sometimes the left is going to say some things that are wrong, or they say some things that are right. It doesn't mean that we're allies. So we have to be able to tell the truth, to notice the truth, to recognize the truth, no matter who's speaking it. But in many cases, some of the people who are speaking a truth are not necessarily our allies, and that's what I think some of our people are getting wrong. And I'll just defer to our brother Bashir from here.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. One of the great things about being a Muslim is that you always get to think Allah first in everything that you do, and hopefully that we get an understanding, some clairvoyance, some objectivity by virtue of the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the to advance the Sheikh's argument, I want all of us to recite in our hearts the story of Khidr and Musa from Surah Al-Kahf, and the most profound statement that Khidr makes to Musa: how can you be patient with me with something that you have no knowledge of? What you find with this leadership, these people who are riding off of the voice of Reagan, the voice of Biden, the voice of American politics, the voice of the American political, social, economic system, are people who have no knowledge of America. They are here in America, maybe immigrants, maybe coming out of the Black experience, where they are educated to accept that America is, in fact, the land of the free, the home of the brave. They're accepting the ideal as opposed to accepting the reality. So when they hear the truth, as Sheikh said, they hear what they hear is a truth, then they grab a hold of it, not knowing that the people who are setting up this particular argument of truth intend to use that truth as a way of going against them as well. So they'll use that LGBTQ argument as a way of luring Muslims in, because Muslims are, I'm going to use this word, I hope the people understand the context in which I'm using it. LGBT, Muslims are anti-LGBTQ because they don't understand America law. They understand Quranic, etc. law, but they don't understand how the issue is being used as a wedge issue. Draw the Muslims in, just like Modi did. Draw the Muslims in on my side, as you have a plan for them as well at the end. But now that you have them on my side, I'm on your side, then I can do what I want because I got all these Muslims on my side. I can hold out a Muslim like the one who's standing in the Trump rally saying, I love this man. Well, think back. Don't get myopic. Don't get locked in. Think back. The same group or level of Muslim thinking existed when George Bush decided he was going to invade Iraq. and invade the Middle East. Because they were inviting George Bush to Muslim masjids, and he was talking about how Islam is a religion of peace, etc., while his plan was to absolutely destroy, the neocons' plan was to destroy most of the Muslim world. Mm-hmm. And they've been attempting to destroy it ever since. But it was Muslims who were siding with this cat, inviting him to this, that, or the other function. I never, as a kid, went to an iftar where an American politician was hosting it. Never. My father would have slapped me in my face for going. Even when I was in college and I was invited, I was a member of student government, and I was invited to an iftar that was sponsored by somebody I knew who was the shaitan. I knew it was a setup because I understand America. I understand the politics of America. The people who are here inviting themselves into this particular discussion, LGBTQ, the jab, family values, as they are defining it, as racism, white supremacy is defining it on both sides. That is the left, the so-called left, they're not left, the Democrats and the Republicans, both of them are white supremacists. And everything that they do, if we start from that particular premise, understanding that everything that they say and everything that they do is just a battle of who will be in control of white supremacy, then we don't pick up their arguments as if those arguments have validity. They have no validity. I don't care what you say about Quran says this about LGBTQ. If the argument is coming from them, it's coming with an agenda to set you up so that you could be the next victim when they start talking about we're going to ban the Quran because it says that Jesus is not the Son of God.
The part of the tests that we have, part of the challenge that we have as Muslims in the West is being able to navigate, a sense of balance. And this is what I believe both of you brothers were pointing to in your responses to this first question of the program. This balance that needs to take place in recognizing the necessity for Muslims in the West to have the kind of independent thought that we're supposed to have. I mean, al-mizan, the balance, being able to draw the good from, whichever side the good is coming from, and, without, while at the same time, striving to avoid the evils, the traps that both of you alluded to. This challenge, as I see it, is both internal as well as external. I mean, I'm quite certain that both of you are aware of the recent attention that confrontation that took place in Texas just a few days ago has received. I mean, it's received a lot of attention. One of the prominent members of the Muslim scholarly class here in the U.S. Had a confrontation with an individual that is known to be a provocateur from among the Muslims, and there was a big a lot of theater in front of one of the large centers in Texas that ended up spilling out throughout the social media. That too has touched a nerve and raised serious questions about internal struggles that Muslims are having, trying to navigate a sense of a sense of authenticity, a sense of spiritual integrity. You know what I'm trying to get at here, brothers?
Brother Saalakhan, what I didn't hear about that in Texas. What in a nutshell happened?
Okay, what happened was the what's the brother's name? Daniel Kikachu, I think.
Oh, right, yes.
He he had said some things about Imam Suhaib Webb. I don't know exactly what was said, but he said some things. He made some accusations that Suhaib Webb took issue with, and basically, challenged him to meet with him and to set things straight, so to speak. And so they ended up having this confrontation in front of one of the large centers in Houston, Texas. And it was all over the internet. I'm surprised that you didn't see it, brother.
Wow.
It was all over the internet, and
you didn't miss anything.
A lot of the social media, and there were those that were just, from my perspective, blindly coming down in support of Suhaib Webb, and then there were many others who were blindly coming down in support of Daniel Kikachu. And for those of us who know him from a distance, I don't know him personally, but from a distance, I mean, he is a provocateur that engages in excessive criticism and condemnation at times.
Right.
Then on the same note, though, there are some. I mean, one of the reasons why much of what he has to say resonates is because he is saying things that a good number of Muslim folk in America are feeling about different members of our class of scholars here in this country. And in some of the positions and what have you they've taken over the years that have drawn justifiable criticism. And so what about you, Muhammad? Brother Abdel Malik didn't he wasn't aware of this. What about you? Were you aware of it? And if so, what are your thoughts?
I was aware of it. I'm aware of these cats because I follow these guys because I want to see what the impact is on our community. I'm old enough to remember when they came here. I'm old enough to remember the Immigration Act of 1965. I'm old enough to remember the opportunity that the government gave to them with my humble opinion, the intent of replacing the indigenous Muslim here in the leadership of Islam in America, which was part and parcel of COINTELPRO. So I'm not surprised by the argument there, because the argument is, if you understand America, referring you back to Kidza, how can you have patience with something that you don't understand?
Right.
They are out in front in the leadership now for the purposes of making sure that there is fitna and confusion in Islam, because they don't understand the political dynamic of America. And so when you see these guys debating openly and in public, instead of closing the door, getting in the closet, the way we were taught to do in the 50s and the 60s, get your brother, pull him to the side, yo, this is wrong. Go back to Muhammad El-Zadeen. Muhammad El-Zadeen is 1936. He grabs the Ahmadiyyas, he grabs the other movements, he brings them to a conference where they all sit down and they come out of it with a united front, Sunni Islam. Go back to Wardi Muhammad. He leaves the nation. He grabs Farrakhan, he grabs Clarence, he says, look, this is the way we're going to run Islam. They say, well, we're not going down with it. Boom, so they go off to their well. But you do that internally first. If they decide to go their own way, then they go their own way. All right? But that's from people who actually understand America and what America will do to use it against the Muslim and the Muslim community. And that's what these guys are playing into. And I'll tell you why they're playing into it, too. So we get a clear understanding. This is from 30 years of criminal trial experience, all right, as well as 60 some odd years of being involved in the understanding of how people move in Islam. They do it for the same reason that Black people try to become part and parcel of the system. They want to be accepted to the Europeans, the white supremacists. They want to be able to say, we can get along with this. Everybody who's out there talking LGBTQ, let's use that as an issue because that's Daniel's number one issue.
Right.
Be true. All right. Everyone who's out there talking about it Name me one of them who talked to you about racism, white supremacy, because that directly impacts on more Muslims than LGBTQ. Don't tell me to take my kids out of public school. I went to a public school. All right? My kids went to public schools. And you know what they did? When they brought home, Joni has 2 parents, 2 dads. They came home and said, Dad, what do you think about this? And Dad sat down with them and walked them through Quran, through the Sunnah, so that when they went back to school, they were able to discuss it. You know, you can put out here whatever you want. But my dad says, boom, 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 boom. Now, if you ain't doing that in your classroom or in your household, then you are definitely afraid of LGBTQ. But if you are, and if you have that in your community, which the so-called Hamitic/Black/African-American community has, the people who should be teaching them how to maneuver Islam in America, if you have that, you don't have any fear of LGBTQ. You know they have an agenda. But you know that agenda is not going to impact on you because you're going to bring the Islam the way it's supposed to be brought. And this is what you're seeing here. The government manipulation, allowing this so that they can be seen as the forefront of the leadership of Islam in America. A bunch of confused guys battling it out over who's going to be best in line to be acceptable by white America.
And see, that's critical what Brother Bashir is saying, because in the documentary that we saw, I did watch the whole thing. The hidden equation, if you will, that he didn't deal with when he talked about these people coming at Islam in America and trying to destroy Islam in America. The hidden equation he didn't deal with is the African American Muslim.
Word.
You know what I'm saying? And there are situations occurring where issues can only be addressed by the African American Muslims, and so we have to be prepared and prepare ourselves to take on that role again. And one of the things I see, unfortunately, is that when I go different places, I see an African American rank and file that is ready to be inspired, but there's sometimes the leadership is not ready to go that way, because sometimes they remember what happened during the 60s and early 70s and so on and so forth, COINTELPRO, that kind of thing. But if we do not play the role that we are geared to play, Allah is going to punish us. He's going to humiliate us. He's going to replace us. And because what the man said was credible in terms of what he said, but he talked about only from the perspective of the immigrant Muslims, and that's all. He didn't deal with us, and we're like invisible. But we play, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this from an arrogant perspective. We play the most critical role in this whole thing. We've been here for 500 years, and Islam has been a part of that struggle. And so the next phase of it, there's no way, Allahu Alam, but with all human certainty, there's no way when he talked about them coming down on Islam in America, so on and so forth, there's no way that the African American Muslim is going to stand for that.
Right.
But we have to be prepared to play that role again. We have to play that role again. And so I just wanted, to re-amplify the point that Brother Bashir is making in terms of how critical it is for the African American Muslim to reassert ourselves and to play our role.
But how does that take place? How do African Americans begin the process of positioning themselves to play the role that you're alluding to, brother? I absolutely agree that we have a very unique sociological experience in this country through the prism of this system. I mean, how we our forefathers and mothers were brought here. That whole experience of having to struggle for, self-determination, for our human rights, not just civil rights, our human rights. We have a very unique sociological experience, but how do we bring that to bear in the kind of way that's needed in order for us to be able to, to be fulfilled in that role, and for us to be able to have the impact that will be of a benefit across the board? I mean, there is that potential there, but How do we access it?
Several years back, I was at the founding meeting for MANA, the Muslim Alliance of North America.
I do remember.
And in that meeting, there was, I'm not going to get too specific, I'm not going to name names, but in that meeting, I remember the goals and objectives, what they were supposed to be. And I remember reading the goals and objectives. And I said to myself, whoever put this together has a history in the Islamic movement and in the struggle in America. And then there was a proposal to revise the goals and objectives. And every point in the first presentation that had to deal with struggle and that had some militancy in it and so on and so forth was taken out, was totally taken out and removed. And then it was a situation where everyone voted on the second, the revised version of the goals and objectives and so on and so forth. And it was very disheartening. And I'll say this too, that it was very interesting because some of the people in that meeting who were indigenous Muslims, American Muslims, two of them were white Muslims. And anytime something militant came up, our two white brothers were there to squash it down. So I'm saying, how is this different from the days of slavery? How is this different from in the 60s when you had, white folks come into our spaces and trying to cool us out and pacify us? The only difference is that we were wearing turbans and kufis. That was the only difference. And so I think we have to organize ourselves. And there's got to be a leadership that's willing to take the positions that need to be taken. And they're willing to go to jail. And they're willing to die. Or they're willing to go to the hospital. That has got to be that type of leadership. And unless we get that type of leadership and that leadership organizes the potential that we have, then no, we won't be able to play our role. Right. We won't be able to assert that this historical legacy that we need to embrace and act upon. And so I think the mechanisms are there, but what direction now are we going? Right. I see conferences being done, African-American Muslims and so on, and I love it. I love it. You know what I'm saying? But in many cases, it's pacified. Right. It's totally and completely pacified. Right. And people are not talking about us playing our role. Mm-hmm. And so the mechanisms, I think, are there. But in terms of going in the direction that we need to go, there is an unwillingness or inability to do that.
The reason why they do that, Sheikh, is because, again, the idea of you saying, this is an allegory. This is a metaphor. So don't take it like it's personal for all you Islamic scholars out there, all right, who like to criticize every word. We are afraid to say we are Kidda. We are afraid to say, you Musa, you come into my land. Right. You come and seeking some guidance about this land from me. I know this.
Exactly.
How can you understand? How can you have patience with something you do not understand? You don't understand America like we understand America. And I'm not even committing myself to being an African American. My father was an Arab, so I take my heritage through my father. But the point is, this experience is unique to so-called Black people, so-called African Americans, so-called Hamites here in America for a reason. The unique experience. Think about this. I did my class the other day, and I did my show Thursday night. To ask who understands Mutulu Shakur and what he stood for. And do you know that the only thing that they know about Mutulu Shakur is one, Tupac's stepfather, and two, apparently help Assata Shakur escape to Cuba. And these are educated. My audience is educated. They don't know about his Islam because he had his janazah last week. They don't know about the idea of acupuncture and the emphasis on acupuncture to knock out the idea that they were using methadone to cure heroin. So they were turning street addicts into state addicts. And that therefore he and his people introduced, organized by him, the Young Lords, the Black Panthers, introduced acupuncture as a remedy for heroin addiction. That they set up labs, they set up clinics, all right? All these kind of things that they began to set up that are all now adopted by the United States government while they tried to destroy the organizations. Now, we are literally, truthfully, afraid of the 60s and the 70s. Like they're not coming back. Like they didn't come back with mass incarceration. Like they didn't come back with crack after you tried to tackle heroin, after you tried to tackle police brutality by the Black Panthers having their own political organizations. Like they didn't try to attack you establishing your own communities as Jamil El-Amin tried to do in Atlanta, Georgia, with certain rules that you had to have when you came to this particular community. That's the part that they never get about America that we have to understand and emphasize about America. We understand that no matter what you do in this culture, unless the only time you're acceptable to America is when you are anti-change. You can just speak reform all you want, but the culture needs to change. I'm not saying that. Martin Luther King Jr. said that for all of you handkerchief heads out there. He said America needed what? A radical revolution of values. He didn't say a mild revolution of values. He didn't say change the way you dress. He said it needed a radical revolution. Revolution, word, take the definition, a complete change, a complete overthrow, a radical revolution of values. He's saying that in 67, and here we are in 2023 with the same value system, and we're contemplating, because people are coming into this country running from whatever system they ran from when they were in that country, and sidestepping the people who are willing to take that chance on a radical revolution of values. And we, as a community, have to get back to the idea that we literally were recognized as the only people who could change America. Isn't that what J. Edgar Hoover said?
Yep.
You have to be aware of the Black community, because why? They may produce a Messiah, and that Messiah was going to change America. And isn't that exactly what Donald Trump said when he came into office? We'd have to shut down on what? Black identity extremists. They don't care how many white radicals you have, how many white terrorists you have. Black extremists is what he said. There was no such thing, had never been done before, never been heard of before, but in their minds, it was still the concept that the people who they consider to be Black have the willingness and the ability to change, because the culture has never spoken directly to anything that helped benefit them. It spoke to things that reform, that keep them appeased, etc., as long as they stay within their classification, but not the point of where it changes the value system. What is the only thing left in the world, the only doctrine left in the world that could change America? Malcolm told you in 65 when he came back from the Hajj. If America were able to accept Islam, then it would change this whole idea of racism, white supremacy. And if your culture is built on racism, white supremacy, and the only doctrine that can change it is Islam, then you need to understand that Islam immediately becomes an enemy to the system. And the people who are willing to change it have to be the ones who step forward and change it, because the people coming in here have a vested interest in seeing that Islam is, like Malcolm said, it started out strong, but by the time you finish putting all that milk in it, you don't even know it's coffee.
That's real. And you know what too, brothers, it's like we have to reintroduce a new generation of African-American Muslims to our legacy.
Fact.
To the historical legacy, what I'll call, if you will, the African-American Islamic tradition. We have to reintroduce them to it. They have to understand it. They have to appreciate it. They have to embrace it. And that's one of the things that's not being done. This new generation is not being taught the significance of our Islamic tradition here, and how this tradition impacts and has an effect on our liberation struggle, and has an effect on this country.
Right.
And so this is almost criminal to do something like that, and to not share that history with this new generation, because they are ready to be inspired.
Right.
They're ready to be inspired, and they're ready to do what's necessary, and to go through their whole process of learning and development and activism and so on and so forth. I'm saying that they're ready, but it's like, again, how do we go through the process? And I think that has to be based on our institutions. It's not going to come from the schools, so it's got to come from the masajid. Mm-hmm. The masajid have to be our schools that reconnect this generation. I'm talking about this new generation of African American Muslims. Our masajid have to be used to help reconnect them to this history, because this country is getting ready to go through some major changes, and Islam is going to be in the forefront of it. And so we have to also deal with that before we can even make moves, that we have to make sure that this generation is connected to our history. One more point. I was telling one brother that they get very frustrated over how our immigrant brothers treat us and so on and so forth, that type of thing. And part of that is true. But if we embrace our legacy, if we embrace our tradition, watch the respect that we'll get. You watch the respect that we'll get if we embrace our tradition. But when we get away from our tradition, we shouldn't be complaining about being treated in a disrespectful way. We deserve it, right? If we deserve it, if we're not coming from and building on our tradition.
Well, you know that excuse me, brings to mind for me a term that I often use when I talk about, especially when I'm talking to young brothers and sisters, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim, young brothers and sisters, particularly from our tribe, from African Americans who are part of this sociological experience. One of the things that that hurts us, that ails us as a people, is the fact that we have there is a large swath. In fact, the largest swath of our folk are not connected to genetic memory, are not connected to, an awareness of the type of struggle that, our forefathers and mothers had to go through in order to get us to where we are today. That genetic memory is absent to a large degree. In fact, one of the ironies, I was in North Carolina last weekend for the for IJAN's the IJAN event, the Riata. Actually, there's going to be 2 Riatas, and this is an indication of what the point that I'm trying to make now. 2 Riatas as opposed to just one unified Riata as there was in years past. There's a split within the association of Imam Jamil Abdul Alamin, and that's very unfortunate. Part of the reason for that is because much of the I would say a good amount of the sensitivity to historical struggle is absent from, many of the young brothers and sisters that are adults now and who are, asserting themselves in positions of leadership within the Jamaat. And a good part of that struggle, that legacy of struggle that Imam Jamil is known for, going all the way back to his days as H. Rap Brown. My sense is that much of that sensitivity for struggle, it's not there. It's not there. I remember attending the Riata. Was it no, it wasn't last year or the year before last because of the pandemic. But before the pandemic hit, I attended the Riata in Atlanta, and I mean, it was well organized, but it was not as impressive as it could have been and should have been from a standpoint of, the sensitivity that we should have, a higher level of sensitivity, especially a Jamaat like that, having had a leader like the leader they've had, who is today a political prisoner, now 23 years in. It's if we don't kindle and rekindle that fire of struggle, that the awareness of the need for struggle, for continuous struggle, we end up paying the price.
Yeah,
we end up paying the price.
Allah will humiliate us. And even with the situation with Imam Jamil is a historical figure.
Yes, he is.
He's a historical figure. And I was surprised to see that there were those who weren't looking at him as a historical figure. You know, and he's in prison. He's in prison because of an accurate analysis, based on an accurate analysis of the system. The next one was slated to be Imam Jamil, in terms of, you know, going from Malcolm and so on and so forth, and the contribution and the next level type thing, so on and so forth. It was Imam Jamil. You know what I'm saying? This is nothing personal. This is just basic analysis, and that was correct. And that's why he's in prison. And so this is a historical figure. And if we turn our backs on our historical figures, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, there's going to be a price to pay. And I'm just really, you know, saddened by, I'll just say, many of the OGs. They're not thinking like Brother Bashir. They're not thinking like Brother Bashir. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's disheartening, because some of us were assuming that they were going to think that way. Because of what they've seen, because of what they've experienced. There are those of us who felt, yeah, they're going to be down. And it was the exact opposite. They weren't down.
Yeah.
And so that was something that was, you know, a little bit disheartening, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, we got to go ahead and do what we have to do. We got to be the ones that we're looking for. But, you know, we can't turn our back on our historical figures like that.
Fact. That's 100% fact. But here, shameless plug, just to throw it out. I do a show every Thursday night from 8 to 10 on hsrn.org called the Raw Law Project. I also teach a class at Ibn Taymiyyah on the law. It's called the Raw Law Project. Ibn Taymiyyah every Saturday. Shameless plug out of the way. Check. The reason why you go to these particular conferences, I'm telling you, 50 years of going to conferences. The reason why you go to these particular conferences and you walk away disheartened, because really it turns out to be Islam and blackface for the so-called black community. Mm-hmm. You are staking your Islam on some sheikh that came from somewhere else.
Yes.
Who's trying to tell you how to negotiate and navigate America, and it doesn't resonate with you because they don't understand America.
Exactly.
When 9/11 hit, right? The same imams, the same collective of imams, were literally discussing whether or not the women should take their hijab off because of the backlash.
Right.
Tell me a black woman who could take off the color of her skin because of the backlash. She can't. So you have taken that little small issue because you are upset that people are attacking you, and so-called black people are getting attacked every day because of the color of their skin. So you take the minute and leave out the major. All right? They couldn't take off the color of their skin. The Muslim man has been, the so-called black man in America has been under attack since 1619 and even before. If you go back to the papal bulls of 1435, when it said go to Africa and enslave anybody who doesn't convert to Christianity and take their land and take their life if you can. So you go back to that. So that particular so-called black man has been under attack because the color of his skin for so long.
Yes.
Even in the Muslim world. Being attacked because of the color of his skin and his heritage, by the way, his bloodline. But I won't get into that here. That's too much to discuss. So he's been attacked. And so therefore, when you come here, all you're doing is coming here with the same mentality, straight out of colonization, straight out of an Islam that was taught to you during a colonized period, about a man who has been here, learning Islam, studying Islam, implementing Islam, and he has turned over because he's afraid. His sensitivity is that I don't want to injure this brother by making it sound like it's a black thing.
Right.
That's really what's going on. So the brothers is like, okay, well, if we do X, Y, or Z, they're going to think we nationalists. Right. I don't care what they think about me.
Right.
Okay, I'm trying to make sure that when the people come to my class, that they have an understanding of political, social, economic, law history that they can apply their Islam to.
Exactly.
What do I care what some Egyptian thinks about me? What do I care about what some Syrian thinks about me? Think about it. Whenever the black population, the so-called black population, gets to be 12.6%, because it's historically going to remain at 12.5%, you mark my words, no matter how many babies you have, every time they set out a statistics or a census, they're going to come back at 12.5 because they can't allow you to get over that particular percentage. Whenever they bring these people into this country, whether it be Ukraine, whether they be Bosnia, whether they be Egypt, whether they be Afghanistan, whether they be Syria, they bring them in and list them as white. Why? Regardless of what their Islam is, they list them as white. Why? Because the nature for them is the only people willing to take a hold of the banner of change because of their oppression is the so-called black man. So then therefore they increase the white population so they can consistently say that black people are only 12% of the population, and they put them in the level of leadership so that they can do what they always do. Remember, again, 9/11, every imam that you talk to, when they put them on an interview, even on your show, you ask them, they say, what does Islam mean? Or they've given a discussion with some people who are not Muslim. They would say, Islam means peace. When I was growing up and they asked you what Islam meant, Islam meant submission. Two different thought processes. Two different thought processes. Islam meaning peace, meaning that we can all get along, versus Islam means submission, meaning we can get along, but I'm not going to follow your rules if your rules conflict with me submitting to Allah.
One of the things, we're taught in the Quran and the prophetic Sunnah, and our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, and those who followed him are an example of this, is that Islam is a healing. It's a mercy and a healing for humanity. One of the things that I have been, I find myself focused on more and more the older I get, is trying my best to show my appreciation, to demonstrate my appreciation for what Almighty Allah has given us through this Islam. And against the backdrop of all of this division and this tension and this the pain that humanity across the board is feeling. This year, there's an interesting convergence for me this year. This particular month in this year, and that is the fact that you have both Dhul-Hijjah, you have the month of Dhul-Hijjah and July, the month of July coinciding. The month of Dhul-Hijjah and the month of July. For me, this is it's quite significant for me because it was in the month of Dhul-Hijjah, in the month of July 1987, that I made my Hajj. This was 36 years ago. And this was, it was the only Hajj I ever made. I've never made Umrah, never done anything else. I just had one Hajj. And that Hajj was the Hajj in which, there was a demonstration, the largest demonstration I had ever participated in. It was a very powerful unity rally of Muslims that was organized just before the official days of Hajj began. This was when, the Hujjaj, the pilgrims, were coming into Mecca from different parts of the world.
87?
This was 87, yes. And there was a demonstration, and this demonstration had been taking place for a number of years. It was getting bigger and bigger each year. It was getting bigger and bigger. And my understanding is that the Saudi authorities tried to persuade the leaders of the Hajj delegation that was responsible for it, tried to persuade them not to have it that year. They not to have it. And that was the Iranian Hajj delegation. Through the negotiations that took place, they came to a settlement, and part of that settlement was, as I understood it, that it would take place that year, but there was some kind of there was something that was agreed to, but it would take place that year as it had taken place in previous years. And like I said, I was told that it had gotten bigger and bigger each year. So long story short, I mean, this was the biggest demonstration I had ever been a part of. And, there were just this huge column of men on one side of the Azizia Street, if I'm not mistaken. But on this one side of this thoroughfare, just men, a column of men as far back as you could see. And then on the other side of the thoroughfare, there was this column of women as far as you could see. I mean, it was huge. And it ended just blocks away, just 2 or 3 blocks away from Masjid al-Haram. This is where the rally took place, where the speech was held. And I remember, I'll never forget, this was 1987. It was a unity speech that was given. I remember that the clarion call throughout was Ayyuhal al-Muslimun atahidu atahidu. O Muslims of the world, unite, unite. That chant, you kept hearing that chant. And then there were placards. There were, people, brothers and sisters were holding large posters and banners that on it that were symbolizing Muslim unity. And yeah, I'm a young Muslim, and I'm just kind of learning the deen, and I was amazed and a little confused, especially because of the way that it ended. The event when it came to the conclusion, the agreement was that, as in the past, the Hujjaj that were there, and it wasn't just Iranians, there were Muslims from all over the world in that rally. There were Sunnis as well as Shia, and it was supposed to end with the Muslims marching after the speech ended, marching toward Masjid al-Haram, and then just going inside and blending that were there and making their circuits around the Kaaba. Again, this was before the official days of Hajj began. But as soon as it came to that end point and everything had been peaceful and just, just peaceful up until that point, when the rally, the speech ended, and that final agreed upon posture was taken, marching toward Masjid al-Haram. I remember, the back doors of these trucks that were lined along the street swinging open, and then out of the trucks, came these men. These were Saudi security forces with these long batons, and they were beating people. They were wading into the crowds, beating people. There were folks on both sides of the street. They were throwing rocks down on the crowd, and the crowds were so thick on both sides that if you threw a rock down, you were. And there was injuries, there was panic, and the short of it is that when all that was said and done, when everything ended, subhanAllah, there were over 404, I think, Muslims that ended up losing their lives, and over 1,000 were injured. Well over 1,000 were injured. And again, I was a young Muslim that stayed with me for quite a while. I mean, it was very disturbing. I had to, work through having had that experience through my rituals, and then coming back home and subhanAllah, having to deal with the confusion and the disinformation and everything else that attended the aftermath of that. I say all that to say, and I don't even know why I into it as much as I did especially in the waning minutes of this this broadcast. But oh, subhanallah, and I see now we're at the end of the time for the broadcast. Inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to have to, because this has been on heavily on my heart, I'm going to have to deal with this in another sitting, you know, just this alone. But I guess what I wanted to say is, you know, I wanted to point out from this is that we have an internal struggle of, we have a unity problem. We have a solidarity problem among the Muslims. And this is in large part hurting us. This has been hurting us for years and years and years. You know, the divide and rule process has kept to realize the capacity that we have, first and foremost, that Islam has for being that healing and that mercy, and what America and the world needs in order, you know, for something good to happen before it's too late. But you know, this is something that also has to happen first and foremost within us, among the Muslims themselves. And brothers, on a final note, with each of you having 1 minute, a final note, you know, speak to the need. You've both spoken to the need for members of our tribe, African American Muslims, to step up and you know, to begin the process of asserting ourselves, asserting the capacity that we have to be a part of that healing process, internally for, you know, where we need it for ourselves, but also externally where it's needed, where we have the ability to influence and impact in a positive way others, if we can tap into that, as I call it, genetic memory, and draw from that the beautiful aspects of the struggle of our people in this country, in this very unique struggle. But what about the capacity we have for unifying, helping to unify, first and foremost, our own Muslim polity, and then, you know, through that process, also, you know, helping, you know, to bring about a healing process for humanity across the board, with recognizing the fact that, you know, we have not just the external opposition, we have the external enemies, we also have these internal enemies, this internal opposition that is hell-bent on keeping us from realizing our Islam fully. Amir Abdel Malik Ali, let's begin with you, brother, and then our brother Muhammad.
Number one, that we keep in mind that we're in a period of Islamic revival. We should never discount that. This is the period of Islamic revival, and Allah's will is going to be done. Number two, I think we need to unify among Muslims, those Muslims who think like we do, those who basically think that Islam is the solution, and that who have an uncompromising disposition. We need to be united among each other, and then we work on building that unity outside of that. Number three, as Black people, knowing and embracing our significance. For example, when we act like how we are, when we act ourselves, we have an effect on other people across the board. We have a universal appeal, not when we crossing over. We have a universal appeal when we act according to who we are. Now, imagine a people who has influence across racial lines, and you give them a universal religion, right? We got people who want to talk like us, walk like us, look like us, the whole nine. Now, give that people a universal religion. What do you think they're going to do with it? We also known for being strong. We're also known for being spiritual. We're also known for having a hatred for injustice. Put all those together, and we will see the significance of our role and our responsibility. And so I'll just end with that. Jazakallah khair.
Alhamdulillah. Brother Muhammad, your final thought, Aki.
My final thought was that was brilliant, what I just heard. That was brilliant. Like, unify with those who think like us. Now, again, I'm not dismissing anyone. I'm just saying that there are enclaves within our leadership or within the leadership of Islam in America that don't understand America. They don't understand the history, and they don't want to understand the history because the history takes them out of the realm of popularity, out of the realm of leadership. The two guys you talked about, Webb and Daniel, right? I remember sitting down with Webb one time at a Busboys and Poets, and he asked what's the problem with America, and I said too many celebrity imams. Because you're reaching the people on the level of celebrity. You're not reaching the people on the level of brotherhood. So we have a unifying message in Islam. None of you will believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. But that unifying message isn't translating into actions that make you treat me like your brother. But those people who think like me treat me like my brother. You see this T-shirt I got on? Sweet Tooth Bakery. You know why I wear this T-shirt? Because the brother who owns Sweet Tooth Bakery treats me like a brother. He is one of the best brothers I've ever met. And anybody who goes, I catch a Muslim at McDonald's and say, wow, you could have spent that on that brother and made sure his institution existed. So the whole question for us and the issue of unity is we have had a history of unifying, especially if you come from the Hamitic, Black, African-American community. Go back to the history, you'll see a history of unity. Now, as the brother indicated, you have universal laws bless you with the universal religion. Don't be like me. Get in your waning days and be afraid that Allah is going to say to you, with all the talents, all the blessings I gave you, you didn't do enough with it. So therefore, I got to teach, I got to speak, I got to talk, I got to write, I got to do all that in order to bring the Muslim or the brother or connect with one brother, if that's, because that brother might be the one who testifies on me in the day of judgment that said, brothers, this way works for us because you can't penetrate us. You can't connect with us. Not the way. Can you imagine a Muslim leader can't connect with a Muslim better than Huey Newton could? Think about that.
Yeah. Okay, my brothers, I want to thank you both. Like I said, I had the program for today did not pan out the way that I had originally thought it would. But this was what it was supposed to be. The three of us, and inshallah ta'ala, the struggle for, to strengthen the ties of brotherhood, the struggle for clarifying what Islam is and what Islam isn't, and the value that it holds for humanity across the board will continue. The struggle will continue. And I want to thank both of you for joining us today. And we'll close out as we normally do. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wal Asr. Inna la insana la fi kusr. Illa ladina amanu wa amalu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. By the token of time, through the ages, surely humanity is in loss except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.